If you do have a mobile phone, be careful. Right, please welcome Nicola Brierley with electricity, electronics and wireless technology, our greatest threat to health and life maybe. First time speaker, Nicola, with a large subject indeed, and one of global importance. As parasites affect virtually every living thing, so do the invisible and painless fields accompanying all electrical devices, wiring, transformers and transmitters. Communications signals permeate everywhere and everything. Multiple TV and radio signals pass through us 24/7 with or without our consent. Governments own the airwaves and lease them to eager businesses. Mobile phone technology has us captured, but at what price? Major diseases have proliferated during the past 100 years that the electricity has become commercially available to all. Physiology graduate and mother Nicola has conducted extensive field studies on radio frequency, non-ionising radiation, dirty electricity, certain lighting and sound. And she then discusses exposure reduction. The most important talk, please welcome Nicola Brierley.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Thank you for inviting me here tonight, Rob, and everybody at New Horizons. This is a subject really that's kind of interested me for at least the past 10 years. I've picked it up, put it down, and just recently I suppose I've been reinvigorated to look into it into much more detail. I've always been interested in health and the effects of what they're doing to our food and that kind of thing, but I'm actually convinced now I think that this is probably a bigger issue than a lot of the other research I've done into those other areas. So I think now is a really good time to get this information out. Now, we've had to do a lot of big technology setup tonight, so I hope it's all going to work okay, because I want to be able to do some demonstrations and show you in real life some of the findings that I've made from looking at doing little experiments with some of the technology that we're using. So that's a kind of setup. There's some visual stuff going on at the same time, and I'll be moving over to do some demonstrations and things like that. So hopefully that's going to go okay. So why am I interested in electromagnetic radiation? There's a growing body of evidence now, a massive, huge body of evidence. The authorities might try and deny it, but it's out there if you look for it, and it's out there in the scientific papers. The dangers of wireless devices, electronics, and the use of mains electricity. A lot of this has been known about pretty much right back from the beginning when it was all implemented. It's been institutionally covered up and obfuscated, this information, but you can find it. It's not a conspiracy theory. We do have evidence to back it all up. Many years ago, I was poisoned by a gas boiler, and it left me quite ill for a number of years. And really, I do have some residual long-term effects from that. That made me sort of chemically sensitive, and I had issues with my thyroid and all kinds of other things. And I think now I've also got electrosensitivity as well, because knowing the kinds of exposures that are all around us and what things you can pick up in your own home and wondering why you're feeling so ill all of the time, I'm pretty much convinced really that it attributes a lot of it. As I mentioned, I've always been interested in biology and health. I've got a physiology degree. I didn't use that, if you like, after I'd graduated. I then went working into IT in the NHS. But I did have some experience looking at some toxicology for a year in industry, working for a big agrochemical company, and looking at some of the things really that are relevant in this presentation. I did some experiments growing cells in culture, some cancer cells that were kept in culture, and some of the compounds that we were exposing them to. Some of the physiological effects of that are relevant to what's going on with electromagnetic radiation. So looking back on that, I learned a lot about some of the mechanisms that might be taking place. 6 years ago, roughly, might be 7, I've forgotten now, my daughter Katie, who's here tonight, who might be helping me a little bit with some of the demonstrations, was about to start primary school. And I was concerned at the time about the number of mobile phone masts that were starting to appear in the area. I knew that there was one in a local school grounds in a primary school, and I deliberately avoided that one, and I will mention that one. And also Wi-Fi access points, and I FOI'd the local authority, got back a spreadsheet, found out that there was already a lot of Wi-Fi access points being set up in schools. Spoke to the headmistress about it, and the line is generally, we'll take our line from, you know, local authority, who take it from government, who are then obviously under the influence of the telecommunications industry. So didn't really make any headway in getting anything done about that. There's a lot more information around now, and it might be something that we can perhaps revisit, but it's just getting worse. And I was aware of the work of Professor Magda Harvus, who's from Canada, Trent University. She's done an awful lot of stuff. It's all out there on YouTube, and she's written lots of papers about it and travels internationally talking about this. A lot of work on Wi-Fi phones, masts, and something called dirty electricity, which I'll come on to. And a lot of work with humans and studies and looking at physiological changes as well, and just highlighting the dangers of the technology. So she, I suppose, is an inspiration. And then just last year, sadly, there was a young girl, 15 years old, Jenny Fry, from the Oxfordshire area, who unfortunately and terribly committed suicide by hanging herself in the local woods. It's a really, really sad story. She'd been complaining about being made sick by Wi-Fi. They'd found out about it at home initially. They discovered what was causing her illness, and they tried to stop it at home. But then she was being exposed at school. She was doing all sorts of things like not going in lessons and trying to avoid the areas where the Wi-Fi was on, asking the school to do something about it. They refused to help her with it. So she got to a point of helplessness, and unfortunately she took her own life. She did text a friend a couple of times before she did it. I think maybe as a cry for help, but her friend unfortunately didn't have a phone that day. And her mother's now doing lots of work to try and raise awareness about this. And this is not an isolated case with this sort of thing, but it's just something that's quite recent and, you know, was quite touching really. So some of the issues I'm going to discuss tonight. I did start out just looking at electromagnetic frequencies from something that we call radio frequencies. So from things like Wi-Fi, mobile phones, DECT phones, which are the cordless phones, which I expect that many of you here will probably have at home, as there's a big decline now in the use of your standard landline that's plugged in. People want to be mobile and walking about while they're on the phone. Mobile phone masts, smart meters, high voltage power lines. Soon discovered that there were other things as well. There were issues with mains electricity, and it's been going on ever since really mains electricity was introduced. Issues with wiring in homes, power quality issues, something that we call dirty electricity, and issues with actually leakage of electric currents into the ground, stray voltages or stray currents as they're known. So we'll have a little look at that. The impact of the really big rise in electronics that's sort of gone on since about the mid-1980s. Use of motors, use of something called switching mode power supplies. I'll talk a little bit about that because that's contributing to quite a lot of the issues with the electricity. And that's the kind of things that's keeping your mobile phones working, your laptops with the mains adapters that they're using, etc. Issues of toxic lighting, which also contribute to this concept of dirty electricity in homes and workplaces. And issues in plants and animals due to the incomplete light spectrum used in most of the lighting that we're probably using, even more so today. And going back to some studies from the 50s, 60s, 70s from a fascinating man called Dr. John Ott, whose work really has been largely obscured from the public. We're going to talk about not clean and not green alternative sources of energy. So any proponents of wind and solar might not like some of the things that I'm going to say about it. None of these things are without issue, and obviously we get a lot of propaganda about, you know, the benefits of them, but we're not told the downside. The scale of the EMF problem, and some demonstrations at the table to try and measure electromagnetic frequencies and dirty electricity. I've also done some at home as well on video, so I can't really bring a mobile phone mast into the room or a power line, so I've got video with those on. Biological effects that this is having and possible mechanisms of action. And what that means is how it might be acting at a cellular level and at a whole tissue, organ and human level. What the mechanisms are and how we think how the biologists think that this is affecting us and our health. Importantly then, how to prevent or reduce exposure. A little section on that at the end. Well, it's probably one of the most important things really, but just to say it's quite challenging and it's very tricky in the world that we're living in. Just knowing, while I've had meters out on hire measuring the frequencies that are being given off by these devices, it's really difficult to get away from it, and it's quite difficult to prevent exposure to a lot of it. But there are things that you can do. There are simple things that you can do at home. It's got me interested in something called grounding or earthing. I don't know if anybody's ever spoke about that here before. Rob, at all? No. I'm surprised. I thought it may have been something that perhaps New Horizons had discussed in the past, but it is relevant in terms of exposure to EMFs and hopefully helping to avoid some of the damage that that's causing, and generally for health and well-being. The concept of healing voltage and exposure to UV light. I'm really well aware of the nefarious use of the technology. I believe it exists, and I probably need another 2 sessions just to talk about that alone. So I'll be talking about our known exposures to it, if you like, but I'm under no illusions that there isn't some sort of biological warfare going on perhaps with some of this. And it's probably being used in a way to specifically target us and target the way that our bodies work, you know, to make us ill and put us out of action, if you like. Yeah. Just a few newspaper headlines here. So the one about Jenny Fry that I've just mentioned, I'll quickly whiz through these. Is Wi-Fi making your child sick? Mobile phone studies on sperm that have been in the news over the past week, motility of sperm, morphology, reduction in sperm count. There's a lot of stuff out there, and a lot of fertility clinics have been picking this up for years. British families at risk from smart meters. There's a big section just on smart meters because that's a huge issue for us. It's a threat, and it's well underway, both internationally and now in this country. It's getting fairly well established. Mobile phones and brain tumours, more stuff from the World Health Organisation. Wi-Fi and the effects of that and mobile phones on children's brains. A TV programme went out last week in Australia on ABC, Catalyst I think it was called. The presenter interviewed quite a lot of the most prolific scientific researchers in the world about this. She presented a programme about the dangers and then got really attacked for the next week. The mobile phone industry, you know, telecommunications have really turned on her, tried to discredit the information, tried to discredit her. It's probably all still ongoing. She may lose her job over it, it could be that bad. This is the kind of tack that they take when somebody gets some information out there and it makes a big hit. They will go out to try and attack you and discredit you, even the top scientists in the world. More studies, mobile phones and cancer clusters around the mass. The European Council wanting to ban the technology in schools. Pylons linked to leukemia, electronic pylons health risk. So that's some of the stuff that you can find easily if you just look around the headlines over the past few years. So what are we concerned about? There's been a massive increase in chronic neurodegenerative degenerative and neurological diseases over, I suppose, the 20th century, but those increases are escalating rapidly now for the past 20 years or so. So things like cancer, heart disease, asthma, inflammatory conditions. Inflammatory conditions are key in all of this because generally that's what the damage is. It's an inflammation that then progresses onto something else, and it, depending on where and how you're being exposed, is depending on what sort of disease you may develop down the line. Autistic spectrum disorders have seen a massive increase, so I'll pick up on that again. And it does seem to fit in with the usage of things like mobile phones over the past 20, 30 years. You can't necessarily say it's a definite cause, but you know, there is some association between the two. Mental health conditions, pain, brain tumour rates are increasing in younger age groups. They take a long time to develop these types of tumours, but some of the rare tumours are starting to increase in incidence, and it is worrying a lot of neurologists. Quite a lot of the scientists out there have hard evidence really that wireless technology is contributing to this, if not, you know, the biggest cause. So just going back to the dramatic increase in autism, a slide I found from a researcher in America who's looked into this a lot, and really you can just see over increasing years as cell phones and cell towers have proliferated, so has the autism rates. Talking about a condition called electro-hypersensitivity, really this can be called many different things. I suppose that's the most common term for it currently. It's been known as many things over the years: electrical sensitivity, microwave syndrome, radio wave sickness, EMF intolerance, and it really dates back to the introduction of this type of wireless technology, even as far back as radar. Not widely diagnosed in this country and accepted and understood, small percentage of the population. However, the actual number of people probably suffering is probably really quite high. And it is recognised in Sweden. There are places that you can go to get away from it all. And they do sort of give you money as well to help you with your sickness there, which you wouldn't get here. Here are some of the symptoms, and they just cross over with lots of different common diseases that we might see today. I won't go into every one of them in detail, but affecting the nervous system, your heart, eyes are a common one with a lot of this, the endocrine system, the immune system, the respiratory system, the skin is another one as well. And a Swedish study shows lots of people here, 400 participants, and some of the symptoms that they commonly get. And these are the kinds of things that come up time and time again in studies on mobile phones, mass, Wi-Fi exposure, all these kinds of symptoms. Don't know if anybody in the room here is, you know, kind of suffering from anything like this, and it's ever crossed their mind, only wondering why, you know, why is this sort of thing happening to me? It could be down to this technology. So electro-hypersensitivity. And we've also got massive problems with wildlife, with animals out there. There's lots of reasons being put forward for this. The kinds of things that they're being exposed to in their diet, GMO, pesticides, all kinds of things like that. But I think because of the proliferation of the technology and how far out across the whole world it is now, which we'll see as we go on, this really could be the biggest reason at the back of it, and I'll go on to the reasons for that. But in bees, I've just picked an experiment really that's been done in bees specifically. We're starting to see colony collapse disorder. I even know somebody that was a beekeeper, and we were going to go and have a look at the hive, and yeah, but the bees have all disappeared, you know, they've gone, and I don't know when I'll get another swarm kind of thing, and this is a common thing with them now. So an experiment was done where the bees were exposed to a cordless phone. It was put in the hive and left in there for 30 minutes. Turned on for 30 minutes twice a week. It caused the bees to just disappear and not come back. No honey, no pollen, no bees in the colony. Worker bees didn't return. So hopefully that's some big evidence that this stuff really affects them. Butterflies and mass animal deaths. Does anybody know about the mass animal deaths that are going on across the world? Has anybody looked into this? There's a website that is updated every day with news items from around the world. This kind of really alarms me when I look at these, but there are thousands and millions of animals, all different types of species, just falling out of the sky, washing up dead on the shores. We've got cattle issues, bird issues, everything. Just about every kind of animal you can imagine in the millions, and every single day there's reports of these animals dying, so possibly caused by electromagnetic radiation. And just in case you think that everybody looks after us and surely we'd know about this, surely they'd tell us if there was a problem, well, maybe not, because we've got a history of things that were very dangerous and kept secret probably for a long time. I think it took decades for the information about cigarettes to get out into the public domain fully about the dangers, and they're a group 1 carcinogen. Asbestos is close to us. We live a couple of 100 metres away from the largest asbestos factory in the whole world that had 70,000 employees, Turner Brothers Asbestos. There's still an ongoing battle on that site. Companies wanted to put 500 houses on there, and there's been some local protest groups fighting it for years. Independent studies have been undertaken. There's asbestos all over the site still. They were dumping it down mine shafts and all kinds of things. I do know people personally that have died of asbestosis and mesothelioma as a result of either them or their partner working at Turner Brothers, and they were washing overalls or something. So it's something we've seen, you know, close to home.